Imagine AI not just as a tool, but as a reflection of our own beliefs about leadership, creativity, and innovation. What if instead of merely optimizing processes, AI was a lens forcing us to confront the way we build, collaborate, and lead? Engineers have long been defined by their ability to solve problems, but today those problems aren't just about efficiency or scale. They're about the systems we create and sustain. And AI is already a co pilot in engineering, but who is truly in control? Is AI shaping the future we envision or merely reinforcing the structures of the past? Welcome to today's session, Code Meets Creativity, How AI is Transforming the Engineering Playbook. I'm excited to be moderating this discussion where we'll explore how AI is not just changing engineering workflows, but reshaping the very essence of leadership and innovation. Joining us today are two phenomenal women leaders who have been shaping the future of engineering leadership. Nidhi Gupta, with 25 years in tech, has held top leadership positions as CTO and CPO, driving transformation across various industries. She is the founder and CEO of SheTO, the largest private network for women in engineering. She is dedicated to closing the gender gap in tech. Her work has been pivotal in creating pathways for women to thrive in an AI driven world. Welcome, Nidhi. Thank you so much for joining us today. Akanksha Deswal is the head of engineering India at DevRev and has played a key role in building scalable AI-driven systems from the ground up. She's an expert in distributed systems and cloud services, having led engineering efforts at Nutanix and Azure. As a founding engineer at DevRev, she has shaped engineering culture and the technical vision in an AI-first world. Thank you so much for joining, Akanksha. So happy to have you. It's truly an honor to have you both here today. Let's just start. I'd like to start this conversation with Nidhi. I mean, tech has long been, a boys' club, and walking into certain rooms as a woman leader often means rewriting the rules as you go. And AI is redefining the future of engineering, and there's both excitement and concern about who gets left behind. What do you think is the biggest opportunity for women in tech today? And what must be done to ensure that they are at the forefront of this transformation rather than being sidelined?
Yep. So I think two things. So first, thank you for having me. Akanksha, so great to meet you and be on this panel with you. Sania, thank you for your initiative, Grace, and super excited to be talking about this today. The way I think about this is, a lot of times, even today, as when we talk about AI, we talk about, oh, to prevent women from being left behind, we need to make sure that there's education for women. Why do we not talk about it in terms of education for men, right? I think to go back to your introduction, we ourselves are biased as human beings, and we are reinforcing those biases in this AI world. So I would love a world. I mean, Fei Li is a woman, right? So we need to remember that. We need to remember that women can learn, but women can also lead. We can be leaders, but we can also be followers. So from my perspective, we should elevate as many women as we do men when we talk about AI, or when we talk about anything for that matter, right? Let's level the playing field. When we have a panel on AI, we should make sure there's equal representation. We don't want anybody to get left behind, leave alone, based on gender. So let's make sure there's equal representation from a gender standpoint, whether it's a panel or a celebration or a recognition or a webinar or what have you. And I think the other thing I would say is we as women, we should not be afraid to speak up. We know that the algorithms, and especially the data sets that the algorithms are using, is trained on what we see in the world today, which fundamentally is biased. So what we need to do is, because we have faced these biases in the world today, we need to speak up to make sure that the training sets are not biased. And I'll give you a very simple example. Before I started SheTO, I was at Hired. Hired was a platform for you to hire software engineers. When I joined Hired, I had a conversation with my director of ML, and I said, can we test to make, I bet you our training set is biased. Employers come in, they search for a candidate, and I'm like, we need to make sure that our search algorithm is not biased. And we would have this back and forth all night long about no, Nidhi, our algorithm is not biased. And then I explained to him, I'm like, look, if in today's world, there are 12 engineers and 88, there are 12 engineers who are women and there are 88 engineers who are men. The training set of 100 candidates will fundamentally have 88 male engineers and 12 female engineers. So what is the likelihood of a female engineer getting surfaced in the data set? I'm not asking you to give a leg up to the women. I'm just asking you to level the playing field. Have a training set which is 50-50. And the minute you level the playing field, you're giving equal opportunity, and hopefully you're shaping the future for the better, right? That's the perspective that we can bring to the table because we have faced these biases and we can articulate and voice these biases.
Yes. I think that's such a relevant point because I'm someone who's also pursued a career in STEM, and I did not know the number of visionary women that are in the field of biotechnology until my professor actually told me about Rosalind Franklin, and like you mentioned, Fee Faley. There are so many incredible women that are there to look up to, but the fact that they're undermined so often, their achievements are undermined of I mean so often, or the credits are being taken somewhere else, is just, I think, in one way it's ridiculous, like having so many people to look up to but not giving them the spotlight they deserve is just, I think it's just heartbreaking sometimes to just read these stories. But I think leading to that, Akanksha, you've been at the forefront of building engineering teams from the ground up. And there's something exhilarating about maybe taking an idea and turning it into a fully functioning, scalable product. And engineering leadership has traditionally followed a structured top down approach, but the future seems to be shifting towards more agile and empowered teams, right? Can you share a moment when you had to make a bold engineering decision that completely changed the trajectory of your team or product? And what was the unexpected challenge and how did you navigate it?
Cool. Yeah, I mean, Nidhi, it was really nice listening to you with the specific example that you mentioned about training set. Um, Definitely a point to ponder. Uh, Coming to your point, Saniha, I think the point that you mentioned about, the team structure fundamentally is changing. I see it at DevRev where, traditionally two pizza teams were a thing, right? Like where you had like 8 to 10 people in your team, and then you had a manager above them, and then another manager managing a bunch of managers and so on. And it was like a deep hierarchy. But more and more, if you even look at uh, how not just in like startups, in how big tech, let's say Facebook, Meta, and others, the team structures are shaping. People are trying to get more flat structured by getting rid of like the middle managers, to say so. Just so that, and more recently, the founder mode has been quite popular as well, right? Where you essentially try to expose as many people who are working on the ground to the founder so that founder can provide them direct clarity and feedback and so on, essentially flattening the hierarchy, which means that you have very high span teams. Whereas in the past, somebody would manage like 8 to 10 people, we are now seeing it's a trend for people to manage even more, like 20, 25 people. Now, when you are directly managing 20, 25 people, and I was reading somewhere, and Nvidia CEO is famously known to manage 40 people, like his direct reportees are 40, like 40, right? So when you are trying to do that, you cannot really follow the traditional methods of management at all. You have to be able to assign people rocks and then give them the autonomy to be able to execute on it independently, right? And as AI is evolving, engineers themselves are becoming very multifaceted, right? Like writing code is much easier now than it was before. You have something like Cursor, you could come in, write code, get productive really fast. That allows them to, get that autonomy. So in terms of like engineering decisions which have been of like looking back, which have been of high impact, I think leverage is something which is of utmost important. There as engineers, young engineers specifically, we have a tendency to like build really fast. But how do you pick between build versus buy? Like in some situations, it might actually be better for you to use an existing solution and build on top of it because it's commoditized, right? Building it from scratch might not be useful at all. That has been a key learning for me to really differentiate like what is the piece of software that's commoditized and we can build on top of, what is it that is really our moat. And over time that changes as well, like what is a moat right now can get commoditized, so it's a very fast moving market as well. But being able to like make that decision for yourself, and um, like if there is something already existing in an organization that you can build on top of and quickly roll out a solution, why would you build something very similar from scratch? Building very similar thing from scratch provides short-term velocity, right? But when it comes to long-term leverage, being able to collaborate with teams outside, being able to add to their software, which takes some amount of humility to do that. Okay, I just need to get this done. I'm improving X person's product in the process, but let me do it because the outcome, we'll be able to reach to the outcome faster. We are improving the same piece of code. I think that principle itself is like a very important, because it can save months and months of work for your team. Like that decision that I'll leverage versus build from scratch can give you months and months of time ahead. So I think that has been one of my key learnings. And managing high span teams, I think we are all figuring out. None of our traditional tools like Jira, etc., equip you to do that really well, right? You probably need like a conversational tool, which we are actually experimenting at DevRev internally, where I can just ask, who are some of my non-focused user developers in the past 1 month, right? Of course, I define what non-focused is. It could mean that they're spread thin on too many things, and so on. Like I should be able to tell that to the AI, but you need these tools to be in hand of or every individual who is managing like 25 to 40 people for that matter, so that they can get quick insights from the AI based on their activity being writing code, writing documents, doing communication in for developers. So I think the traditional tools are not at all made for this age. We have to think about the tools to be able to manage high span teams ground up, which we are trying to do at DevRev.
And she's doing a very good job doing that. That is something I can attest to at least. I just want to talk a little bit about, the kind of, let's say, the expectations of women's successes in the society as a general concept, right? Now, I think I've read this somewhere, both I think from Nidhi and Akanksha as well, that growing up, you've mentioned that, seeing women in leadership roles was not the norm. And the achievements of women in technology and science, like we said, were often undermined, right? And I can say this from what I've seen in Indian society, because that's the only thing I can, talk about. Women's advancements in these fields, especially technology and engineering, are sometimes viewed as these extraordinary exceptions rather than the expected norm, right? So how have you navigated this reality, and what do you believe needs to change in the way we view women's accomplishments in tech to make them feel more recognized and celebrated as the norm and not just an exception? Nidhi, if you could start with that.
Yeah, and I think that was true when I was growing up, and that's still true, right?
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. So, I mentioned earlier, 12% of engineers are women. The reason why I started SheTO is because less than 9% of engineering exec roles are held by women. I mean, 9%, that is just abysmally low, right? But we do exist. It's not like we don't exist, but we don't see each other. We hang in separate networks. We don't connect with each other because our numbers are so small, we can't find each other. And I think the same is true for recognitions, right? I think, so when I started SheTO, I didn't even know that 15 of us existed. The story of SheTO is, I got invited to this intimate dinner of CTOs. I went for this dinner. I fully expected to walk into a room full of men. And I walked into a room full of 15 other women. And I was shocked. I was shocked that there were 15 other people who looked like me in my role. And that's when I had an aha moment where I was like, okay, if I don't know of 15 other women, then how is the next generation going to aspire to be us? And that's when, the next month I quit my job and I started SheTO. So the point being, we know today SheTO is, we have 4,500 women across 54 different countries. So what started as a dream when I didn't even know that 15 of us existed, in 3 short years were over 4,500 big. So we definitely exist. It's just a matter of finding us and leveling the playing field. The role models that we see today, like Fei Fei Li, they existed back then. Grace Hopper, as an example, right? We just, people who somebody wanted to give an award, somebody wanted to give some recognition, they just didn't do the legwork. Their network was very homogenous. They didn't seek out, other people who didn't look like them, and, they recognized all men. That's the story that repeats itself over and over and over again. I mean, heck, just a year ago, New York Times had a front page, full page article on, top 10 people in AI, and Fei Fei Li was not even mentioned. Right? Imagine the hypocrisy, and I think it's just lazy reporting, right? So I would just say there is an absence in terms of numbers, but we are not fully absent. We are present. Yet those role models existed before, they still exist. Yes, they are fewer, but we need to make sure it's just a numbers game. We need to level the playing field. And look, at the end of the day, nobody else is going to do this for us. We need to speak up. We need to do this, right? So anytime you are attending a meeting and you see only men speaking, you need to speak up. Anytime you are at a conference and you see very few women, or you see the token woman, you need to speak up, because we do exist. And I think the more we take this upon ourselves, the more we speak up, we will challenge people's unconscious biases. Right? At the end of the day, all of these are unconscious biases. Nobody is like, doing this intentionally. We'll question their unconscious biases, and we will challenge them to go beyond their network. I will tell you on LinkedIn, if I see there's a friend of mine, she calls it manel. So anytime she sees a panel announcement, which just has men, she has this little image, it's called Put a Woman on It. And she calls them out. And sure enough, they go seek another woman to add to the panel so that they level the playing field. And by the way, if you want to look her up and follow her, her name is Alison Byers, and she's amazing. And I think that's the point, right? We need to speak up because nobody else is going to speak out for us. It's just a pure numbers game. So level the playing field, even out the number of men and women, and magic will happen. We will inspire not just us, but also, the next generation.
Shout out to Alison in that case. She's doing God's work. Akanksha, anything that you would like to add to that?
No, I mean, I think when Nidhi said that over years, not a lot has changed, like that resonated a lot with me. Like while growing up, I always thought that, things will be different. Like I'm like, what, like above almost 30 now. I thought like as a 15-20-year-old, I would think that, in 10 years, world would change. But then you are in that situation and you really realize that, like like Nidhi said, that you are alone. You're still like the only one in a room a lot of times. And you look at the next generation, and I'm able to look, let's say, 5-6 generations ahead, because, we have people coming right out of college and joining DevRev. And you see the percentages still being the same, right? Like, so and that's the aspect about tech. But if you go a little deeper into like just India as a whole, aspects around just discrimination when it comes to a female child, a boy child, like it's not going away. And that's surprising for me. Like shouldn't it, like in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, like shouldn't things change? But they are not. And then what I feel is that all we can do is, like, in our own way, make sure that we are helping out the next generation, helping out people around us, uplifting them. Just make, like, the only thing that you can do is feel that your contributions count, and maybe do, like, if enough of us do it, it makes a bigger impact as a whole. But I always wonder, maybe not as deeply as Nidhi does, that why are things not changing? It's been years. Like, how long is it going to change? Will they ever be the same forever? Like, that's something that I wonder a lot.
I think like a huge aspect of that is also because, we're all busy pondering on the questions and asking the questions, but nobody's really spending time on finding the answers to these questions. So therefore, it's just a loop that keeps going. But Nidhi, you have created SheTO, right? You started SheTO to create a space where women engineers could break through leadership barriers, and women in engineering are, often advised to be resilient, but resilience alone doesn't break barriers. And what point did you realize that SheTO wasn't just an initiative, but a movement? And what was the defining moment when you saw the real impact of your work?
That's such a great question. So when like I said, when I started SheTO, I had no idea. People would ask me, Nidhi, what is your TAM? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how many of us exist, right? And I would just be like, okay,
Did
for
someone
me,
really ask you what is your TAM? Like, did
yeah,
someone?
of course. Yeah, of course, it comes up all the time. Like, how big can your network be? And thankfully, I'm a nonprofit. I'm not a for-profit, so I'm not raising money from like VCs and stuff. But of course, it's like, how big. At the end of the day, if you have to build a sustainable business, you have to kind of guesstimate as to how large this community can be and what have you. I don't know. I have no idea, right? And my hypothesis going in is, I want to deliver impact, and if I touch one life, that's mission accomplished. And I think that hypothesis has served me well. And I will tell you, the first 2 years were a slog. I mean, even now it's a slog, but there are lots of moments of gratification in between. The I think the moment I realized that it was a movement actually was not the numbers, because the numbers are big, right? It was not the numbers, it was the impact. And now, almost on a weekly basis, some member will reach out to me to say, thank you for impacting my career. Thank you for helping me progress my career. Or, specific things, which I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And what has happened now is the impact has been so great that there are people who don't even know me who will talk about how SheTO has helped them. And they'll post something on LinkedIn, and I was like, whoa, who are you? And this is great. This is awesome, right? And I think very specific things like, today I became a CTO because of SheTO. SheTO saved my career. I had left tech, and SheTO inspired me to stay. Right? Or some of the numbers that we see directly, like, so we host these accelerator programs, and 47% of participants in our accelerator programs get promoted within the first year. Right? That is what tells me that we're having an impact, and this is truly a movement. And that's really what fulfills my heart and soul.
Gratification is an understatement in that case, Nidhi. That is such an understatement to what you just said. Um, Akanksha, I mean, let's just talk about the elephant in the room, right? AI. With AI becoming an integral part of engineering, there's always this lingering question, does AI replace or amplify human potential? Akanksha, you have led teams at the intersection of AI and engineering. And how do you help engineers, shift their mindset from seeing AI as a threat to embracing it as a creative co-pilot? And maybe you can, share an example where AI unlocked an opportunity that traditional methods couldn't.
Yeah. I mean, this is again a question which I think over very hard. But then I try to find solutions too, because that's my job. But in this case, like we are used to a tech stack where you had like microservices and APIs, and like your microservice was your space of autonomy. You could produce an impact on, and teams would own it, or let's say that a particular library would be, and so on. But now the terminology itself has changed, right? So now we are talking about skills, agents, and then prompting and RAG and things like that. And one thing is that it really requires all of us to like, you would need engineers to build that out, right? So to the fear of course there will be change, right? Like things that you were comfortable with before, you might be doing something very different than that. Like you might be thinking about labeling data, benchmarking it, getting feedback, but you would still need engineers to build product. That's my hypothesis. Fundamentally, your day to day will change, your terminology will change, but you still will be pretty relevant in building out these solution in engineering these solutions for end users. Will AI be reductive in some sense? Unfortunately, yes. Like that's my thesis. That something like in big tech, the amount of revenue per engineer is increasing, right? Like an impact that you can produce as an individual engineer is increasing. Like you have tools like Cursor at your disposal that you could use to churn out solutions faster. So AI will be reductive in some sense. Like I still don't have a complete answer to like when it is reductive and when people are getting fired. There are trends in industry. How do we meaningfully engage them back in within tech is something to be seen. But for a majority of people, I think it's just going to be a change of terminology where they can produce more impact individually than, let's say, the fear of being redundant at all. And I think that's where I think for myself as well, and for like a lot of female engineers, because I have in general seen that males are more confident about like terms and owning it without like knowing the depth of it than females are. And I think we should not be left behind. Like, okay, what is RAG? Like just read it up, right? Like there's a vector database. But you will see like a male engineer being like extremely confident about it, being ahead of it in terms of, yeah, I know it, this is how it happens. And maybe like a female not so much. So I think it's just about owning that terminology, like getting your hands dirty. That's the only way, and it's engineering at the end of the day, I believe. Nothing more than that. Like large language models have commoditized the AI part of it anyway. That's my thought on it.
Confidence is key in that case.
Yeah, I get into it with a lot of confidence. What else can I say?
Yeah. This is something that, I kind of want to ask, because I think this is a question that a lot of women do face, going forward in their careers. Leadership in tech is often portrayed as this continuous, uninterrupted journey. But for many women, balancing this with, say, personal milestones like motherhood, it's not always linear. Even though we have paternity leaves and this equal expectation of fathers taking in responsibility, it's always often considered a woman's responsibility when it comes to taking care of the child. Have you ever faced a moment where you felt you had to choose between your career and your personal life? And how have you navigated this balancing act? And I know this is a very like redundant question, how do you manage both? But I think this is a question everybody would love an answer to. And what do you think the industry needs to change to better support women in tech, and in a way that would help them lead without compromising? Nidhi, if you could like to start.
It is hard. It's very, very hard, right? I mean, I think more than the industry, it's more of a societal issue, right? Um, I will, coming from both India and now the US, I will say, India is more heavily patriarchal than the US, but the biases in the US are pretty much the same. So, I mean, when I had my daughter, I literally did not have a job to go back to, right? Which was illegal, borderline illegal. I could have sued them. When I started looking, I met with several exec recruiters, and they were shocked that I was coming back. And actually, to me, it didn't even compute. I'm like, why would I not come back? Why would I not work again? But they were like, this is when we lose all the women, right? So these things happen. And I think there's a few things we can do. Yes, companies can be more supportive, but until society at large changes around us, there's only so much a company can do. There's only so much, any of us can do, right? The company can provide uh, parental leaves for, both parents and stuff like that. But if your husband or your spouse is not going to take the days off, or if your mother-in-law is going to expect you to be sitting at home taking care of the baby and cooking, then, it's on you, right? So my only 2 cents here would be, this shit is hard, buckle up and fight it. Fight for what you want. If you want to stay at home with the baby, more power to you. If you want to come back to work, you need to stand up for what you want to do, and you need to fight your way through it. It took me 1 year to find a job after I had my daughter. 1 full year. Nobody would hire me. CEOs would tell me to my face that because I was a new mom, they needed me to be available at work 24/7. And because I would have to go home to feed the child, they were not going to be able to hire me. This shit is real. And I would just say, surround yourself with networks. This is where the power of networks comes in, right? Whether it's SheTO or whatever other community, or Grace, or whatever other community that you can find, lean on those communities. Because what happens in that is, when you're facing these things, you don't want to talk to anybody. You think you're alone. You think your struggles are alone. I mean, I will tell you, in my career's been interrupted 3 times. I had a child. I was a caregiver for my brother and my mom. Both of them were in India and they were terminally sick. And both the times I had to leave my job here and move to India. And when I was going through that, I thought I was the only one. There's nobody else around me who had gotten their career interrupted. So I basically just went through it alone. Had I had a network like SheTO, and had I leaned on the network, had I shared with them, I would have discovered that I'm not alone. There's so many of us that go through this because we're all going through living in the same society. This happens at SheTO all the time, right? So lean on those find those networks, lean on those networks, and at least knowing that you're not alone is going to help you plow through these hardships, because this is real.
I think that is the power of community, right? That you
Mhm.
find somebody to lean on.
Yeah.
Akanksha, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I mean,
Any
this is so raw for me. I have a 15-month-old Nidhi. I think I'll state like two instances. Like, first of all, this responsibility of like leading engineering in India as a whole. Like, prior to that, I had like a big team of my own, but like a more broader site lead responsibility was handed over to me like when I was pregnant. So that's like, again, I think I find myself very I think Dheeraj and Manoj have lived their life like our founders, and they have a very long-term perspective to everything, and that made their decision different than it would have been for others. But personally, it really put me in a very interesting situation. That's one. And more recently, I was in a leadership offsite in Rishikesh. I was still like breastfeeding my kid when that happened, and I thought I'll leave him behind, for whatever time duration it was, and my mom would take care. But I could not, like, I've never left him behind before that day, and I could not do, like, days I was out, but nights I had to be with him, right? So and I was very embarrassed to like ask if I can bring him along, because I had these doubts that, people will think I'm not serious about it. I think a lot of it is very internalized as well, I would say, because it's such an exception. Like, you don't see that happening. If I had like 6 other women with their kids in the offsite, it would be a norm. But like, I wrote that and they were very supportive. There's like, of course, bring him along. And my mom came along to a leadership offsite. It's quite funny, and then like, but it's so internalized that, I would go to breakfast at a different time so that like I don't see eye to eye with everybody else when I'm like having breakfast with them and they are having like a serious conversation about the strategy and stuff on the desk about it, right? And then I know we had night meetings, and I would get a call from my mom that he's suddenly woken up, and I would like go running back to the room and then come running back. It's unimaginable. It's a very lived in experience. Unless you go through it, you don't really realize like how serious it is. And I can understand why so many people like give up and choose one over the other, because doing both is extremely tough. Right. And I mean, I think I look back and I say throughout my life, I never really felt that being a woman was like a disadvantage in anything that I do, whether it's studies or like working. But when I became a mother, like it invokes certain feelings in you where you really feel that, of course, parenting is not 50-50. Like my husband is very supportive, but that's also the truth of it, that from a woman, you it's expected more. Like no matter how hard they try, it's never 50-50. That was the only time when I felt that men had it easy. I had some disadvantage that I had to work extra hard to work around. Like the only moment it's very tough. It's starting to get better, like, as my son becomes more independent. But I have like so many funny stories. And I think again to Nidhi's point, when I was panicking right before my mat leave, because I've never taken such a long leave, like maximum like a week in like many, many years. I was like, the world will, crash and burn if I go on this holiday. The only person, and there was somebody like my mentor from previous job, my first mentor, who I had not talked to. And I knew she had two kids, and like, of course, everybody is busy in their lives. We had never talked to each other, but I picked up my phone and I messaged her, "Hi, Annie." And that was the most comforting experience for me to like talk to her. I'm not kidding. I mean, then like she was there in my baby shower, and like she helped me through it. And similarly, our people officer Aditi, she is also a mom to boys, and like I messaged her, and both of them were the ones who. And I had this idea that I'll come back. India has 6 months, so we are in a better shape. But I had this idea that I'll come back in like 3 months because I have such an important job to go back to. And Aditi kind of told me that, you are crazy. Like this time in your life is so important. And she kind of pushed me to take that leave. And I was wondering why is she like pushing me so much. But I realized when I reached that point as to how important it was. So, I mean, pretty critical. And I think specifically in that phase, community plays an important role, because for everything else, you can seek advice from your male friends. But this is one thing where they just don't know. It's such a lived in experience, they don't know.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Akanksha, that you need advice from those who have walked in your shoes before, right?
Yeah.
So, to add to a few of the examples that you gave, um, when I was seeking a role, and I was like, I'm a hard worker, I'm a kick-ass leader, but of course I'm a mom, so I should be very open and honest about this. So, when I was looking for new roles, right in the first conversation, this guy doesn't know me from jack shit, right? And I'm openly telling him, hey, I'm a new mom. I just wanted to disclose this to you. And of course, he would be like, no, we can't hire a new mom. And then my girlfriend, she, bless her heart, I told her, I said, dude, I'm unhireable now. And she's like, why are you telling them this? You know your work ethic. They don't know you yet. Why do you feel the obligation to disclose this? You're not hiding anything, but you just have a child. It's not a big deal. So you're still going to work your butt off. And literally, the second I stopped doing that, I got a job. Right? Another girlfriend of mine, she was pregnant, and she was like, oh my, and she's only 3 months pregnant. And she's like, I'm frustrated at my job, but I can't change because I'm pregnant. We gave her the same advice. So I think that's where whether it's a large community, small community, your friend group, your chief people officer, whoever that community and that network is, you need to talk to them and lean on them, because chances are they've gone through the same shit that you're going through.
And also this goes to prove that, girls have your back no matter what. The girls
Yes,
will always come to your rescue no matter what.
100%, 100%.
I just want to kind of, frame this question. I think this is the last question that I have before we open, the forum for Q&A. If you could go back in time and maybe give your younger self one piece of advice at the start of your career, what would it be? Because looking ahead, AI is reshaping the very fabric of engineering and leadership. And what's one fundamental shift, whether in mindset, policy, or company culture, that you believe is necessary today to build an inclusive and forward-thinking tech industry for the next generation that's to come? Akanksha, if you could like to go first.
Yeah, I mean, I would like give one like personal advice to my younger self, and then like one technical advice. I think the personal advice would be that I've seen in the past, and I still do that a lot. Like I always had this tendency to like prove myself, where I would work hard in situations when I could have just like worked smarter. Like I would take on more work because I thought that's a way for me to prove my worth. But looking back, I could have worked on like lesser things, but things I really found interesting. And sometimes because I was in a lot of this like I have to prove myself, work hard mode, I would like take a lot. I think I've like being able, like, you have a choice. I think that's what I would tell my younger self, that you can choose to say no to a project you don't find interesting, but the other one where you think you will learn more, like, don't say yes because you feel obligated to. So that's what I would tell myself: less pain, more learning. I think that way than I have ended up doing. I still tell that to myself, though I don't know I'm there yet. And second, the technical aspect would be that, again, like, once you have focus on like these key rocks and you are not dealing with like several projects, several pebbles, several sand at one, especially when you are starting out your career, you can go really deep. And no matter what, like, depth matters. And in engineering, you can always apply concepts from one domain to other domain. Like, it's all transferable, just like fashion. Like, I think it goes in cycles, and you can like get ideas from here, apply it there. But you can only do that if you've gone deep enough. And in some cases, I think I focus a lot on outcomes. I would have rather like taken it a little chill, that it's okay, I'll deliver it little later, or I'll deliver it at my own pace, but let me take my time with it. So I think that's what I would say.
I think plus one to both of the things that you said, Akanksha. I think to add to that, I would say the personal advice I would give to my younger self would be to find networks, to not go it alone. Because I did. I went it alone. I went alone for the most part of my career, which I think I could have definitely benefited from leading others, not just for moral support, but also from learning from their mistakes. And if you learn from their mistakes, the likelihood of me repeating those mistakes would have been lower, and I would have made different sets of mistakes. I think from a career advice standpoint, the one advice I would give to my younger self is know that you can always find another job. And the minute it took me a long time to get there. And because at the end of the day, you have to have had a successful career or what have you to get that confidence in yourself and your ability. But this, I will say, the minute I realized that, it unlocked so much in me. I felt the freedom to say no to projects. I felt the freedom to walk away from jobs. I felt the freedom to speak up. And I was like, you know what? If if you're not going to shape up, or if this is not the environment for me, I don't want to push this boulder uphill. I'm out of here. And that was very freeing. So however you get there, just know that you can always find another job. And that will just free you up to do what your heart desires.
Amazing. I think I've literally had such a blast talking to the both of you today. It's just been, one of those coffee shop conversations that you have, but it's just so important to listen to. I mean, thank you so much for answering my questions, Akanksha, Nidhi. We do have, two questions to answer. So I think this is something Nidhi could answer. With the research and innovation funding organizations like the NSF acquiescing to the politics of the new administration, flagging and defunding research and new innovation aimed at mitigating biases of all types, how do you recommend women in the space access capital to continue the work they are doing? Who should we be leaning on for access?
Look, this is tough. Every single day we're having this conversation amongst SheTOs, right? So I will say two things. D&I is a fairly new concept, or new terminology rather, right? I think it dates back to like 10 years ago. We existed before, women thrived before, and we will continue to do that even well past this administration. So my guidance and advice would be keep doing the work that you're doing. This administration can keep doing whatever they're doing, and that's on them. Right now, what we hear, the noise we hear in the media and our social networks is not our value system, but there are many, many, many people in this world, in this country who exist, who are supportive of initiatives like this. But I don't want to sugarcoat this whole thing. Like, yes, research is going to suffer, the movement's going to suffer, there's going to be a lot of setbacks. But let's look at history, right? In India, the freedom movement, from the British, it had progress and setbacks. You look at slavery, we had progress and setbacks. Everything in history has never been an up and up, a straight and up line. There's always been progress, one step forward, 10 steps back, sort of a thing. And this is just a 10 steps back moment. So seek the networks where you find a supportive community, seek the networks. At SheTO, for example, we host an annual summit at which we get a lot of VCs, and we get a lot of female VCs, or VCs who are supportive of our mission, right? This is how you connect. If you're looking for funding, this is how you connect with people. You find networks where, like, you find the people. You will have to work extra hard, no doubt about it. And that is what we'll collectively have to do. But there are enough around us who are supportive of us existing and us thriving. So let's find each other.
Hope is what drives the world.
Yeah. Yep.
This is another question that we have from Hiba. Would you say it would be easier if your husband participated more in the parenting? You mentioned how it's difficult for women to manage being a mom and working at the same time. Would it not be different if fathers were as concerned about their children as mothers?
Akanksha, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, more recent, I can comment on it. I mean, I think as they say, like raising kid really takes a village, right? With even like, let's say, and in that case, like, even if like the father is like equally active, um, you have to play that tag game that, like, oh, you have the mornings, I have the evenings. I mean, it literally takes a village. Like traditionally, you would have like big families you would raise kids in, depending on what your new family structure is, that in spite of all your help, uh, all the help that you have, it still is a lot. Like among the toughest and the most rewarding things, they say, but it is actually tough, even with all the help that one has. Um, I think one thing which is more personal is like, I personally feel that there are some needs of the kid that sometimes only the mom can meet. Like, feeding is specifically one of them, which generally the doctors tell you to do for a year and all, which kind of puts like a little extra burden on the mom. And just like with everything in life, that you cannot, and this is my personal perspective, like if we try to split everything 50-50, exact half, I think marriages would not last as well, you know. Some of us are good at something, others are good at and something else. So it's a very personal situation that you have figured out. So I would say, first of all, like in spite of all the help, like I have my in-laws, my parents, and everybody helping, it is still a lot. Like it's such a time-consuming and such an involved process, I would say. Um, and hence you have to power through it, like at least the initial 3-4 years. That's what I would say. But Nidhi, I mean, I'm in the thick of it, so my perspective might be different than yours. But yeah, please.
Yeah, so my daughter's 15, and we obviously, we had her when in the US, where that not that much of a support structure exists, to be honest, right? So Heba, I think, and I would say, heck yeah, right? Like, a husband being an equal participant or 60% participant would be phenomenal. But I think, as Akanksha said, no matter how much we try, like I love my husband, he's great, he does a ton around the house, but it's still not 50-50, right? The burden just falls on you. So I think if we lived in a society where it was truly 50-50 or 60-40, where I'm 40%, that would be phenomenal, but that's unfortunately not the reality. And I think more than your own nuclear family, if that's the setup, it's the society around you that brings you down. Even if it doesn't impact your nuclear family and the decisions that you make, it's the society around you that'll bring you down, because you go to the park, it's the moms who are hanging with the kids, not the husbands, right? You go to do, school pickup or drop off, it's the moms that are there. So like, I had this massive mom's guilt, Akanksha. I don't know about you, but like, it was real for me. It was like, I'm, when I had my daughter, I'm reading all these blogs, and they're all talking about all the things that they're doing with their kids, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not taking her to the library. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. And I will tell you, the first time I took her to the library for a reading or something, I wanted to pull my hair out. Because it's just not me. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just not me. And so I think it's the society around you that kind of guilts you and that plays a number on you. And I think that's I think the more that to me is a bigger issue than your husband. I think a husband equally participating, 100% needed. So I don't want to mitigate that. But even if that happens, I think it's the society around you. And I think that's where you need to be your own self to say, I'm okay with this. And, I got to the point where I'm okay with this. I'm not one of those women, and my child will be okay, even if I don't go for a sing along or a reading to the library when she's like a sack of potatoes, So, I mean, when they're born, they're like a sack of potatoes. Like, fine, she'll be fine. She doesn't need it. So,
I mean, I think I would add to add like just one line on that. I think what I've seen with like one of my other teammates is also like going through it right now, very young kid. That somehow if you're a perfectionist at work, you try to like take more, like I've seen moms be so chill who generally take life in a stride, are like happy-go-lucky about it. But generally, if you are professionally somebody who has like very high standards for yourself, you kind of like try to apply those in your personal and parenting life and miserably fail at it. I think parenting is that one thing where you should just go with the flow. Don't try to be like a perfectionist. Otherwise, it will be miserable. So I think that in itself takes learning. I think initial few months that I have these principles of life which I'm extremely good at. Don't try to apply them as it is to parenting. Like in parenting, just like, take it slow. It's family, it's home, it's love. It's different aspect. Like you don't have to be perfect
agree.
in as much as at work.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nidhi, Akanksha, for joining us today. I think it's been such a wonderful conversation. We've covered so much ground, from AI, engineering, motherhood, so many different things to talk about. I mean, AI will undoubtedly write the next chapter in engineering, but ultimately we hold the pen, right? How we choose to write that story, whether it disrupts, redefines, or builds a future, that is entirely up to us. And we hope that future is efficient and equitable. where everybody has a seat at the table. Thank you so much, Nidhi. Thank you so much, Akanksha. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I hope you had a fun time listening as much as I did. And please stay tuned for what's up next with Grace. And thank you so much for joining, everyone. Thanks, Nidhi. Thanks, Akanksha.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ananya. Bye.
Bye-bye.